So, welcome to the Handstand Factory Handstandcast. I am Mikael Kristiansen, and right over here we have
Emmet Lewis. Thank you all for tuning in. This is our first episode of our first season. We're really excited about this. We're also just making this up as we go along, so bear with us while we get set. First things first, though, I suppose we should explain a little bit about ourselves, what we do, and what we're going to achieve.
A little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Mikael Kristiansen. I am a hand balancer. I did the University of Dance and Circus, and before that I did breakdancing. And now I work as a circus performer and handstand teacher. And I work a lot with Emmet, with what we call the Handstand Factory. And Handstand Factory is, would you like to say what it actually is?
Yeah, let me introduce myself first. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Emmet Lewis. I am an acrobatics coach. I'm known in the general fitness world as the flexibility wizard or the splits wizard. It's more just I've sort of tailored a lot of my teaching to general flexibility people of how to get flexible as an adult and this kind of thing. I'm sure you can follow this along on my YouTube. But I'm also an acrobatics coach. I also coach handstands like Mikael. I'm not as high level at handstands or ever was as him, but he is a machine, as we say, in human form. But, so we kind of together to make this project, the Handstand Factory it's basically we just wanted to get our voice out on how we feel handstand coaching is and how it should be done. And, we're putting together, let's say I've been in the coaching business directly for a good 12 years now as my main thing. Mikael's been coaching for about the same amount of time. So we're putting, 20,000 hours of experience coaching into a product.
Exactly. So this is a podcast that you are listening to right now. And so we have basically been thinking about just various topics that we'd like to cover. And there'll be a little bit of different things. Some that will be kind of just directly handstand related. Some that will be kind of more in terms of like circus and other things. And we have loads of different interests. So we don't exactly know what direction this will go in as of yet. But stick with us and you'll see, I guess.
I suppose it's kind of, we're getting into that thing of, this can be slightly viewer-led if you're listening in and have some stuff you want us to talk about or are interested in, feel free to contact us on social media, let us know. We'll put it into the pot and we'll see if it's if there's interest and we'll do it. So I suppose in our first episode, we were kind of debating, we're like, what would we do for the first episode, thinking there was any other choice. But the only choice we really have is to say, what is a handstand?
Talk about
what is the handstand?
Kind of.
Why would you choose to do this kind of thing? It's kind of one of these things that I suppose we're just going to look at mainly the two-arm handstand this episode, and we have to actually get a working definition of what is a handstand, and also just like for us, I suppose that's quite a big thing. Obviously, we make a product on it, but then also within that big thing of what is a handstand, there's also like we only teach a certain subset of what is a handstand, I suppose.
Yeah, like I think that one thing that's actually been a very interesting doing Handstand Factory in terms of that, because we had to put a lot of thoughts onto paper and a lot of assumptions and general ideas that we that we had from before, but that we hadn't really clarified. And exactly that thing, like what is a handstand? Like what actually defines that? That isn't such a, or it seems like it's very clear, a handstand is a straight shape where you're on two arms, but is it really? Like of course there's a lot to be said for it being that, but for what I find fascinating is just seeing but what is the context where it's relevant? Like what are you trying to use it for, or are you doing it for its own sake? How do you want it to look? All these things kind of play in on what the handstand kind of is to you or is to the context. So that was like a very important thing that we kind of went into when discussing this. And obviously our kind of approach to the handstand comes from our backgrounds, which are from the circus, and there's of course loads of kind of associations and loads of concepts that come with it when you come from that direction, but that doesn't mean that is all it is.
I think there's a lot of, if you look at the history or if you look at anything on handstands, there's a lot of things that it's the aesthetic has been designed for a reason, has been chosen, but then it's become a set thing where people are, it has to be like this because this is the most technically efficient way to do it, when in reality It's just because the aesthetic changes. You can even see it, like, if we go back to the history of hand balance. If you go back to the early courses, the York course of hand balancing, and
Polinetti,
Professor Polinetti.
True art and science of hand balancing.
Professor. When do we become professors? That's what I want to know. But he's talking about, in the book, he's talking about, like, the curved flowing lines of the American handstand versus the straight European handstand, and how the curved flowing lines is much more aesthetic. And there's some pictures in the book. He's perfectly capable of doing a chin on chest, perfectly straight, shoulders open handstand. Yet his choices and the way he was teaching was for this curved arching shape. So it's kind of...
They even argue for the fact that it is easier to balance with the arch back, because you can kind of use that curvature to balance, and of course you lower your center of mass, so it makes sense. It's I remember, like, when I started hand balancing back in like 2000, I think my first class was, still remember, it was the 18th of December 2007. That's when I had my first handstand class, and like around that time I got the True Art and Science of Hand Balancing, like a kind of a copy of it, and read through it, and I find it fascinating. This was like just the way they used to do it, because they weren't bad. Like, they were super fucking good at doing this, and it works. It's just, and another interesting thing is that, like, it's very intuitive to think that the straight handstand is the correct one, but if you also look at, like, what is the intuitive handstand? It's not a straight handstand. If you ask a child to kick up to a handstand on the grass, they're going to arch their back, they're going to bend their arms, they're going to do all these weird things that the body automatically will do to solve this equation of staying on the hands. For a child, they're going to be up there for like a millisecond, but that is what the body is going to try to do to solve this complex equation. And all these things in terms of aesthetics and efficiency and so on, like, of course they matter, and especially if you want to take your practice to a high level. But
you've got to watch over the table there, Mikael.
Clumsy ass.
Whoever's typing, kicking our amazingly ghetto setup in my living room. It's we've got the good equipment, but we couldn't afford the studio.
No.
So I think, our next Kickstarter is like, get us a podcast studio with proper recording tables.
Joe Rogan 2.0, what we're doing here, except with acrobatics.
If you could send me some weed as well. Mikael just wants methamphetamine.
Yeah, of course.
So it's kind of, we'll balance it out. It's the yin to his yang. I think it's one of these things that it's also like, a handstand is very context specific, in that if we look at the different disciplines and what you're going to do, it's almost like, what do you do before and after the handstand defines the actual handstand itself and why it might be certain ways. So we could use the idea in gymnastics. It's, if you look at the way a lot of gymnasts do their handstands, they have to hold their handstand for 2 seconds to get full marks in their competition. They have to enter from one way, and they have to exit generally with a roll, and that's would be a common element in floor. But they have to hold it straight, but they'll also hold with a wider hand position than we'd normally coach for hand balance. The reason for this is, if you are on a gymnastic floor, it is much easier to actually hold with a wider position. It also comes down to, remember one of the first lessons I had on this, on the push, is like, I used to think many years ago that you must push as high as you can, get the shoulders right up. But then I had one of the gymnastics coaches explain, no, that's more to do with high bar. Because if you are on high bar and you're swinging at high speed and you have not got your shoulders shrugged up completely, then as you come down and get the whip and the swing to go into a giant, you can just lose the push as gravity kicks in and as the force kicks in, and that can like cause some tweaks, cause some issues. So you think when they're coaching kids, when they're coaching, they want the shoulders up as far as they can so they don't get that jerk and lose that energy. Whereas say in hand balance now, I don't know, if you look at Mikael's handstand, do you even elevate your shoulder?
Yeah, I always elevate, but like I never go max. I would say my general elevation is around 80 degrees. Or like 80%.
Yeah.
I push so that I feel I'm active in the traps on two arms, and when I go to one, I push higher. But like there's only a few like very specific positions where I push to 100%, and like I feel like there's a kind of it's a kind of thing that's taken for granted that you need to push to 100% on two arms, and like. I think what ends up happening when you're trying to do that is that you'll be wasting power. So the general thing I like to say is that like if you push so high that you feel that you have to kind of twist your face, like make a grimace with your face, you're pushing too high because you're just starting to like drain yourself more than necessary. So, and like you said in gymnastics, like these things are very important because you need to be working with this like large extension. I mean, even if you just want to go into a roll from a handstand, if your handstand position is not properly pushed out, you're not going to be traveling as far as in your roll. Same if you're going into like a what's it called, round off and these things. You really want to use this push because you want to travel through space with a handstand. And as you said, before and after it is what is starting to matter. So like this is something that's quite fascinating because you have gymnastics, which is kind of, I think, I don't want to call it a problem, but it's a thing that like gymnastics is of course the most widely spread physical activity that uses handstand, and that has caused gymnastics to be the largest authority, especially on the internet with handstands. And then it kind of mixes with various concepts from other disciplines that use handstands, such as circus, such as like hand balancing, hand to hand. But like even like breakdancing, capoeira, all these other things are also using handstands. It's just that the point of using it and the way that you want to use them will be different, and then the expression needs to be different.
Yeah, just to touch on the capoeira thing, I remember talking to Simon Takur from Ancestral Movement. Check him out, he's pretty cool. But he was big into capoeira. He was talking about the capoeira handstand, and they coach with a wider arm position and with bent elbows and with the head through. And the reason for this, and they can hold handstands quite long, is one, you'll always be kind of entering your handstand from the side. Two, you want to keep your head through so you can see your opponent. And then the other one, what I found the most interesting for me is they want the elbows bent because that gives them more options to move laterally on the handstand and come down, so you can transition. You might go up on the left, come back down on the left, or go up on the right, or move around. So they have that kind of this lateral motion that we have almost via our choice and techniques have removed from the handstand with the circus handstand. So it's kind of like they've adapted and go, no, this is our usage of it, and this is the way we want to use it. So what shape does that handstand need to be, or what kind of structure does it need?
And of course they will want to kick from it. So why the hell would you want your legs straight and together? Pointless. You'd rather want them bent and close to your body, so you can whip out the leg towards your opponent.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, you always have to think like, what is the context? And I suppose that kind of leads us into I suppose we should give what is a working definition of a handstand.
Yeah,
I think the easiest way to do it is, for me anyway, is a handstand is when there is only 2 points of contact with the body. So what that means,
to the floor
or to the body, because there's a thing, if we think about, say, arm balances, like elbow stands and stuff like that, it is, I wouldn't count that as a handstand, it's a balance for me, because we have the hands on the floor, but then the body has another point of contact with the elbows on the knee, or like an air baby or something like this, or all those yoga kind of arm balances. So while people would say that is a handstand, for me it's not. It's just, you should be, only point of contact for the body is the hands either on the floor or possibly on your apparatus, and there's no other points of contact, and the body is not sealing up anywhere else.
Yeah, it's like that is just one thing that I wanted to touch on before we move kind of into more of the circusy things that we teach. Is just like, since I come from breakdancing, I spent a bunch of years on that before I met my first handstand coach, Corey Tabino, in 2007, late 2007. And like in breaking, like you don't really think about how you stand on your hands. Like it's kind of, you're never taught the handstand. Like maybe there are tutorials online for like b-boys nowadays, but like when I was training, it was just kind of taken for granted. You learn your baby freeze, you learn your elbow stand, you learn your handstand because you want to do a freeze with it. So and like there's a couple of interesting parts to that. Like first of all, you don't really think much about it, and of course breakers, they just spend a lot of time training and trying, and because so much of the stuff they do are with the hands on the floor, and they build the strength and the control and so on, they kind of get it over time. It's very unspecific technically, but they get it. And there also you want to keep your arms bent. And even remember, like a b-boy here asked me about like presses to handstand, because he was doing like Staller presses, but he was bending his arms, and he said like, yeah, is this a problem? And I said like, you're breaking. Why is it a problem? Like, yes, if you want to do it with straight arms like gymnastics or circus style, sure, then you can train it with straight arms, but you're breaking, it's much more efficient to have your arms bent, because you're going to move up and down from baby freeze and elbow stands and all these things, and then you can actually use the dynamics that kind of is integral to the aesthetics and to the techniques of breaking, rather than like, okay, making your handstand into kind of a gymnastic shape, which you also can. It just has these different aesthetical qualities and these different goals to them. So I just find that very, very fascinating too, because to me those are kind of some of the kind of main categories that use handstands: gymnastics, circus handstands, hand-to-hand balancing, breakdancing, capoeira, and I guess you could also say diving, though for them they just stay on two arms and then they whip out of it. So I mean, they need a good handstand, but it's...
We could also say the Y word. Yoga.
Ah, yes, yoga too. That's true. It exists there. And I guess CrossFitters walk on their hands as well.
CrossFit, yeah. That's an interesting one of like, CrossFit have like, everyone just to diverge slightly, it's like they've taken the handstand and they've made it into the most CrossFit thing possible. It's like handstand push-up. It's like, if you look at the tutorials of handstand push-up, they make me cringe inside a little of how bad they are in what I believe is a good technique for handstand. But it makes perfect sense for CrossFit. It's like, okay, I need to get the reps in as fast as possible, and I don't really need to balance it, and I don't really need to worry about, correct shoulder alignment or everything. So, or correct as I see it. See, this is the other thing. It comes down to like, there's a lot of ownership on these things. A lot of people say this is the one true way. What we'd really like to get to, I suppose, is there's not really one true way.
Yeah, there isn't
is
really one true way. I think it's very relevant, and I think the more you teach, or the more at least I have taught, and the more people I've seen doing this stuff, it's just even within these specific disciplines, you start seeing variation. And I suppose that like sports, like gymnastics, is the place where you'd think that you'd see the least amount of variation, because they have a code of points. Yeah. Like, it is specific, and you will lose points if you move in a certain way rather than another. In circus, we don't really have that, but at the same time, circus has a very strong tradition on aesthetics and technique, and there is kind of like an internal, judgment on how things look. And I like, that's something we're going to get back to in another episode, but like it's still like the general concepts that you kind of feel that you have to follow, these like straight legs, like the pointed toes, the fucking line, and so on, which is like, it's looked upon as kind of it's not just good criteria to have, it's just if you don't have them, you are a bad person, or at least that's what the internet tells you.
Yeah, definitely. With the it's a lot of stuff that is efficient training aids. It's kind of funny when you watch like the education of a circus artist, not even counting handstands, but there's like a certain aesthetic that comes from the training tools that just, it's there to build the body awareness. So toes pointed, legs locked, no micro bends, pay attention to what your extremities are doing. And this is there just to build the body map that you'll begin to go, oh, okay, I can do a move and I can feel my feet. Okay, now I can choose to do something. How can I express something? But then a lot of circus, like you learn all these movements with this kind of aesthetic that is derived from the training. And then a lot of people spend a lot of years trying to get rid of that aesthetic and trying to find like, oh wait, I can do it correct, but how do I do my own thing? I suppose it's kind of, I always think of it a bit like paint by numbers. It's like you've got to get inside the lines, but that's just teaching you how to control the pen and how to paint. And then afterwards you have to like get a sheet of paper and get some spray cans out, throw the pens away maybe.
Yeah. But it's like even if you I remember like the first thing in True Art, the Science of Hand Balancing by Polinetti. I think it came out in the 40s. He was at his best in I think in the 1920s. But the first thing that's in the book is actually ballet. Like, it's showing like the different leg positions of ballet and how that is what you're trying to achieve aesthetically in your handstands. Even when they're doing like the very arched handstand, like the outfits they use are kind of these like tight white full covering outfits, and they're like, it's like this, the general pointed toes, locked knees thing and all of that. And of course, like through gymnastics, through ballet and sort of stuff, like of course the efficiency of it is very important, but I find also the aesthetics interesting, because if you take the aesthetics of what essentially became ballet, and if you take the context it's performed in a stage and the audience is far away. So having a very straight leg and pointed toes make your leg look longer. So you will it fits the format because it's just more visible. That is also like if someone has a very wide straddle and very like the legs look very long when they do a handstand on stage, it's more aesthetical in terms of the way that it's more visible in space. And I again think it's very interesting in terms of if you compare it to breakdancing, which has a totally different aesthetic, but also breaking is designed to be looked at from a very close proximity. Like you're in a circle and you're like 1.5 meter away from the person dancing. So it just has like these different contexts, and that also leads into
I suppose it's breaking. Maybe you can see like more fine details up close, so you can get a more hint of a person's individual
angles.
Style.
Yeah, and it's about angles. Like if you look at kind of the way that if you kind of take pictures of the freeze frames of either when they're doing footwork or when they're doing like freezes and stuff, it's always about creating these kind of intricate angles that I find very fascinating that no one uses in hand balancing, for example. It's very rare to see. And I suppose that also like leads a bit into that thing of the actual training of it, which I think also affects the way that or the aesthetics, simply because like it's really, really hard to learn, which means that you spend an enormous amount of time perfecting this kind of techniques, the straightness, and of course you have all these criteria that are kind of enforced by the community and by the ideas and so on. But
what did your friend call that again? Was it the cabal or was it the?
No, that was Jonathan Fortin. He called that. What was it? He called it the federation. So
the federation says you must have your knees locked.
Exactly.
So
the federation, according to him, Jonathan, I think Fortin, maybe he's French. He's a French circus artist that does aerial straps, and he had this concept about the federation. And the federation is basically they're with you even when you're alone, because like you look at your video and you look at yourself and like, oh no, this was ugly, it was bad. And he would always, like, let's say you did a handstand or a trick that wasn't perfect, and he'd always question, why is it bad? Why is it not a trick when you didn't lift your hand all the way up to your knee in your one arm? You only lifted it to 45 degrees. Why is that not a thing? Why is it only a thing when you got your hand up to your knee?
Yeah.
And like this is like how kind of like that the training aspect and the difficulty kind of influences and kind of enforces a certain aesthetic too. And I find that very interesting in terms of if we kind of then look at the practice of handstand. Since it's difficult and it takes a lot of time, and obviously when you spend all this time like achieving these criteria, and you're obviously happy when you achieve your straight line or your press to handstand and so on, and you want it to look nice according to these criteria, then that kind of becomes this sort of just very generalized box.
It becomes like it must be this rather than like I want it to be this.
Exactly.
It's just interesting because it's like if we begin, it's one of those things I've done a few years ago when I was really trying to understand handstands from a different level. I began like stripping everything out of my handstand and see what was the things that made me stay without falling. And I was like, well, I would have given all the same advice to people over the years. You must do 90-second dish holds before you start training, and arch holds and all this kind of stuff. And you must have your toes pointed, knees locked. And the style of handstand I was taught at the time, we had external rotation at the hip, so your position was kind of like a ballet first position. But I started like stripping this out, and I came to this conclusion. I was like, okay, well, I only really need two things for my handstand. I need my fingers, my hands to be able to do something. I need a certain amount of push in my shoulders. Then everything else was like became optional. It's like, okay, I can just, my foot can just relax. I can just ignore it. My knees can be bent. They can be straight. They can be obviously just even ignoring the shapes. It's like my score, like the core, the bane of the existence, must squeeze my core. And I spend a lot of time doing that. Like you'll see some of the people from the same school as me, they basically suck their stomach in like a stomach vacuum because that's how they were taught. You don't need that. And you don't need like the rib pull down, or you don't need anything like that. You just basically need shoulders and fingers, and then everything else comes on top of that. It's a choice almost.
Yeah, and it's like it's a foot stand. Like it should be the same as a foot stand, and like you stand on your feet. It's not very difficult because you've done it for all your life. But if you look at a baby who's learning to stand, they're going to wobble all over the place, just as someone learning to handstand. It's just going to be very similar, and that's, I think, like, it's interesting, that thing with the core, because it's like, it makes sense on paper that you should be this kind of stick, and if the entire stick is tight, then it should somehow be easier to balance it. But like, again, like, the gymnastics perspective has influenced that a lot, I think, because in gymnastics they do teach it with this like very rigid, hardcore tension in the midsection, which makes perfect sense for the context. Because if you're teaching a child that is going to do very high level gymnastics, or even like not even high level gymnastics, but you want to swing around the bar, you want to do tumbling, you want to swing around the rings and all this, then you need to have that tension through the entire body as you swing, and you need to reinforce that idea from the get-go, so that every time you go upside down, this is hardwired into the entire structure. While it's very interesting, because like, I've had a number of discussions over the years with people about this the core tension,
the core
thing.
conundrum.
Yeah, and I just like sent like a general message around to like a ton of my hand balancing friends, like pretty high level people, but some also just like people that can just stand on two arms, and just asked them like, yeah, do you actually think about tensing your midsection while you're in a handstand? And like a couple of them just answered, what do you mean? And we're talking people who are pretty badass, very, very solid on one arm. And I never tense my abs when I'm in a one arm either. It's just, as when you stand on your legs, if you stand on one leg, you don't need to squeeze your abs to be able to balance better on your feet. And the example that I love to use this one when I teach as well. It's just like, and you that listen now, you can try this right away. You just stand on one leg, and then you look at your foot, and you're going to see that if you stand on one leg and look at your foot, the foot will kind of wiggle back and forth a little bit and helping you to balance. And it'll do that more than when you stand on 2 feet, because you have a smaller base of support, right? Now, just stand there and you'll feel that like your body won't move that much. But then, without changing any body tension, without changing anything in your body, just close your eyes and see what happens. And lo and behold, you will likely be wobbling more back and forth. Your foot will have to work faster and harder to keep you in balance. And your kind of core part of your body will wobble, like your shoulder part will wobble and so on. And this is the same thing that happens in a handstand. You're just balancing slower because you don't any longer have any visual cue. And it'll be the same in a one-arm handstand or in a handstand. Like, you get up there, you're not completely used to the context, your muscles are maybe not completely strong enough yet, you fatigue, you're not sure what to do, and so on and so on and so on. Things will move around just like a baby learning to walk. So just, it's fine to tense your abs, but you don't need to.
Yeah, once again, it's like, come back to the whole idea of choice and everything else. It's like, we have to remember, like, force propagates from the ground through the body like a wave. It doesn't, I don't squeeze my fingers and it instantly cause a reaction in my toes. It kind of takes a second to travel up. And if you're really solid, it just means you end up putting more leverage through your fingers. Whereas if you are a bit more, we're not talking floppy, but it's always this idea I tell my students, it's like a guitar string. We're tuning a guitar string to play the note of the fingers. And that's what gets the balance going. So it's this idea that if you're trying, you're just wasting energy in some ways. Like, it's one of those things, like, there's a different quality I learned in circus, where we had these classes called extension, and I didn't really get the point of them. The lady teaching them, Lorraine, was the ballet teacher and also an aerialist, but she was very good, very influential actually when I was there. But she would teach, it was meant to be a flexibility class, but she said, no, I'm teaching extension. And I didn't get what the quality was until, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, where he's trying to basically make this stretching feeling across the body, and that's what holds it in place. So when we're doing ballet, instead of having your arms up the side, you start dying. If you could find this stretch out, suddenly you're kind of expanding into it, and it's holding you in place, but it's taking very little energy. So you get this in, it's what a lot of these cues are going towards in a handstand. Push up, push into the floor, stretch out, stretch the arms out, make them as long as possible. Reach your toes to the ceiling, make yourself long. This is what's happening with a lot of these cues, but they're just training wheels that once you've got the quality of it, once you've got the body connected in a way you can feel it, then you can just choose to do other stuff. So it's this idea of like, we teach a certain way to be able just to go eventually, okay, I'm done, I don't need that cue anymore, it works for me. So it's like myself, when I do my handstands, I have my checklist. And the only thing I've started paying attention now is my feet, because I'm a bit lazy on them. I'd like, for the aesthetic reason, to have a better point. And my weight placement in the hand. I want, basically, I know exactly where the weight should be in a 2-arm. And I can now feel, it takes a while to get this, like if I'm arching, if the placement is too far forward in the hand, if I'm piked, it's too far back, if I've got the weight shifted. And it's just like, it's this verticality with the ground that I'm seeking, and that's kind of what will cause you to balance and give you a center to balance around.
Yeah, it's I think when people are learning this too, it's important to not be too detailed in the beginning, because it's you need to take your time in terms of letting your body understand what is going on. And if you're trying to, like, there's an analogy I often use, is like, if I have someone who's a complete beginner and I try to teach them handstand, and I give them 18 different cues that are super duper ultra important to do, or else they will fail forever, then they're going to be trying to focus on way too many things at once, and it becomes as if like I'm trying to fill their cup with information, but they don't have a cup. Like, it just doesn't matter. Like, they can't take in all these things. So, like, if I tell them, okay, you need to squeeze your quads, you need to point your toes, you need to tense your ass, you need to push high through the shoulders, you need to bring the sternum in, you need to look at the floor like this, you need to squeeze the fingers like that on the ground. Now you're going to do blah, 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 and they keep going like that. Like, they're not ready. It's not, doesn't matter. It's like, if someone gives me like a fucking like physics equation, I'm just going to look at it and be like, I see the numbers and the signs, and I kind of know what this one means, but
that's a plus sign.
Yeah, but it's going to stop there, because I don't have the capacity. I haven't learned how to do that kind of mathematics, so it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to be able to do anything with that. So rather being able to separate, and then like you can start using certain concepts. And I think what we've tried to do, at least in Handstand Factory, is like figuring out what are the most important ones. Like Emmet just said, like it's very interesting if you're able to that thing. What did you say there with finding out like those two things that matter? You needed some push in the shoulders, and you needed the grip of the fingers, and the rest is kind of optional. Finding those things that are the most important, so that you can focus on those. And once you're able to focus on those, like, then you can start adding. And same thing with just like other elements of the handstand too. Like, okay, I've never been in my hands before. This feels scary. Oh, well, if you're scared, like, you can definitely not take in 18 different cues. You can be like, holy shit, I feel like I'm falling on my face here. Yeah. Okay, and I need to reassure you, okay, so it's going to be fine. You can work on it like this. You build, maybe you just need to build some strength holding your body first.
Yeah.
So if you can't hold the body up, how the hell can you expect to balance the body?
It's like that thing you see where, if you're ever coaching a beginner's class, you have people like chest to wall, and someone who just isn't strong enough to maintain the push in the shoulders, and the body goes sloppy. It's just a mental drive thing. And then you say, oh no, squeeze your legs together, point your toes, or squeeze your glutes, or whatever it is. And then they do that, but then they instantly lose the shoulder push, because they haven't done it long enough to maintain the quality of shoulder push while shifting the focus somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, the harder the shape is to maintain, the less you can take in.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think this goes on every level, and that's what I think is fascinating with handstands, and why people tend to persevere and kind of train it for a long time, is that whenever you enter into a new area of skill, like, you will always kind of have like your minimal level of skill, the kind of what you can always do, like to the degree that, like, when you're good on handstands, you can kind of always just do a normal handstand. You'll be able to, because it's so much of a comfortable thing, and then you have kind of your general mid-level of things which you can access most of the time, and it's not a big problem. But then when you move to the kind of the edge of your skill level, it'll always be the same. It'll always kind of be equally challenging. I guess this goes for everything, but I think that like this kind of pushing against this limit is something that is interesting, and something where you again experience this kind of blindness to your own body, or like, okay, where am I in space now? And like, one thing I like to do every time I teach is, because of course people see me, okay, yeah, well, they look at me and like, of course you can stand on your hands, you're really strong, you've done handstands for 12 years, obviously it's easy for you to say, but like, put me on a trampoline and I'm literally that beginner in front of me. Like,
on your hands even?
Huh?
Can you do handstand?
I mean, I can handstand bounce, yeah, but fuck that for the
I mean,
wrists.
like flips.
Nah, like anything in the air like that. I'm just not good at rotating in the air. Like it's not a skill that I've built up. So I'll be at the exact same level where like the person going like, oh shit, but I feel kind of insecure going into a handstand here. Will you catch me? People ask that. Will you catch me? Yes, I'm your spotter. I've done this forever. Of course I'll catch you. But I understand the question. In the same way as if I'm standing on a fucking trampoline and I'm going to backflip and someone's going to spot me on that. And I'm like, ugh, I need to kind of look at the person first before I do the fucking backflip because I can't do trampoline. And it's not a different story than anything else. It's just if you're a beginner at something, you're going to have to encounter those same kind of blocks kind of that you need to breach. Now it's the same shit with even like academic things or entirely different disciplines. You will be insecure, and you'll need to get that security and that understanding before you feel ready and able and feel good about actually trying to do these things. Because in the beginning, it's scary and it's obvious.
Yeah, it's like one of those things. The fear of the inversion, it happens a lot. Particularly, it seems to propagate in the yoga world a lot. That like there's something fearful to be about it, and I think a lot of it is just like the fear of the unknown. It's like, what's going to happen? What's my body going to do? Can I feel it upside down?
Yeah, the blindness.
That kind of blindness until you've actually got some experience with it. Going like, okay, this is what it feels like. I can support myself. I can, I know how to come down. I know what I'm doing. Basically, this is what it comes down to. Leads
and you know that you're not going to die. That's the thing that like I think getting rid of that fear is all about just like if you know that you always see the floor and that your other like let's say you do handstand and then you fall over and you see the floor at all times and you're able to move one of your hands and then you put that hand on the floor so that you don't fall further forwards, then you put your feet on the ground, then everything is fine because you always have kind of an like you can always see what is happening. You are with yourself in kind of the context, and I think that is like it's also one thing that I find interesting, like in looking at kind of how people are working with this in various other worlds than the circus. Because like actually first time I taught a workshop was in early 2010, I think, in Helsinki. And I got invited by a friend of mine who lives there to teach at the yoga studio, and mostly very inexperienced people with handstands. And I had never taught before. I'd been in school for a while, and I had like a reasonable understanding, but I kind of tried to build some sort of like workshop structure. And then like some guy asked me like, I taught them wall stuff, and he's like, oh, well, what happens if you fall out? And I'm like, oh yeah, but you just twist down. And I just go up to the wall, I fall over, I twist down, put my feet on the floor. Not a big deal, right? And he just looks at me as if I'm like, what do you mean twist down? It just strikes me like, what the hell do I mean twist down? This makes no sense whatsoever to the person in front of me at all. And of course it doesn't. So I literally was there and I said like, you know what? I haven't actually thought about that. Let me figure it out. And I built up a way of teaching this so that like they could approach it by breaking it down. But like it makes sense that like this feels scary at first. And what I also but another thing I think is interesting in that terms is that it's also easy to put like to make it into too big of a deal, and that I've seen a little bit in several of these disciplines. And again, to return to breakdancing, like the reason why a lot of people like there, it's kind of like, of course, everyone that starts it are mostly young and just like get into it and try a lot, but the attitude is kind of like, oh yeah, handstand, yeah, you just try, and that's all you get to know about it. And then you just try, and then you do all these things, and suddenly you can do it. It's not kind of a thing that's a big deal. And of course, the older people get, and like kind of like I like with trampoline, put me on trampoline now, it's going to take a lot longer to learn than a 17-year-old, but
we can test that out. We'll go to trampoline park with you.
Fuck that.
I think actually just remember we went to the trampoline park and had a student meetup, and Mikael was teaching at it. And we went to trampoline park on the second day, and the only person to like wreck themselves was Mikael at the trampoline park.
I remember. Like, I guess I did classes in school, so I could do the basic. I could do like, of course, like sit to stand and like bounce stomach, and I could
do some flips. And
stuff, I could, but like I did jump to stomach, and I did the timing with the hands wrong. So because I came down too much frontal, and I was gonna jump the stomach and just went. Remember like a proper cracking in the back.
Besides like me and one other person, no one else had done any trampoline. Everyone came out fine, no injuries except Mikael, who like wrecked himself.
God knew. So. But what was I saying? I was saying something about the thing. What was the thing?
Let's segue on to. I have one question for
please.
both of us, basically, of what's more important when doing a handstand, balance or perfection?
Easily balance, because like without that, like you're. I've seen so much perfection without balance. I mean, if you're doing hand to hand as a flyer, it's fine. Then because that's your job, is to make the pretty shape, and then the other person's job is to balance you. But if you want to balance it yourself, like you need to deal with that first. Again, like balance is kind of your cup. Perfection is more information in the cup.
Yeah, it's definitely this idea that you'll see with the chest to wall handstand and the alignments, and everyone wondering about the shoulder mobility, and you're like, well, I can't do a handstand because I can't hold 5 by 90 second chest to wall holds and all this. And it's like, well, that's conditioning. That's fine. You do need some conditioning. Don't say we're throwing it out, but it's also, you would see it like, it's not a chest to wall handstand. It's constant to wall handstand where you're constantly facing the wall and you're not willing to just go in. And then you see it like, you see people will try it, and the first time you learn to balance, your technique goes out the window. It looks terrible. That's fine. But until you can actually balance for 25, 30 seconds, there's no point in worrying about whether everything is perfect.
Yeah.
Like, details will tidy up. It's kind of, we encourage this idea of like, we train the details as much as they can so they emerge almost naturally as you do the practice, and not try to be focused on unless you have a specific focus point.
Yeah, I like the thing of if you, like regarding, how to say, if you...
I could quote you on this one.
Like adding and removing variables. That was the one I was gonna say. So I think that like both of those are necessary for learning. And by removing variables, I basically mean that, like, let's say you're a freestanding handstand. It consists of kicking into the handstand, catching the balance, bringing your legs together, and then holding it and then coming down. So let's say that a person just needs to work on balance. So well, then you can do a wall setup, for example, with stomach to wall, and then you're like the kind of one leg lift thing that we do in the program and so on in push. But and there's tons of other variations of moving into balance. But what you remove the kick up, so that you don't need to worry about that at this point, because then you're like, okay, it's a balance drill, so you can develop balance as a separate capacity. Then you can work on your kick up as separate, as kind of half kick ups, and work on that as a separate capacity. And then you can work on your alignment as a separate capacity, like doing certain drills for that. And whenever you want to work specifically on one thing, like, you're better off removing a variable or two, so that like you can concentrate on that. And after, as the time goes on, you get really good at kick ups. You have like pretty good balance. Okay, then you kick up into balance. Maybe your alignment isn't perfect at that time, but you're able to hold, you're able to stay, which means you're building those two capacities together. But at the same time, you know that you still need to work on this like straightness of your handstand. Okay, well then you do that as a separate thing. Then you go back to the wall, remove variables again, and then you work on it there. And then slowly but surely you piece these things together.
Yeah. So I suppose we've been talking for about 40 minutes. I suppose I'd just like to kind of summarize what we're getting at in this. Is like, what is a handstand for us? It's context specific of what you want it to do. What are you using the handstand? Is it the art of hand balance, which we teach, or is it a component of a discipline which is larger than just the handstand itself? Then it's also this idea, like, can we have a working definition? So I threw out the one as just, you have the hands as the main point of contact of the ground, and there's no other point of contact either with the space, be it a wall, floor, or your own body.
Or even the person. There's no spotter.
No spotter. I don't know. There could be 7 spotters running away in the background.
Yeah, it could be. Get him out of the frame for the screenshot. Click. Greatness.
Yeah, and that's of, and then it's the idea of like, we're trying to find like what actually is the minimal amount you personally need. Now I said, for me it's fingers and shoulders. For someone else it could be glutes and fingers. It just becomes down. I was like, well, this is personal. It's your own. This is going to cause a bit of cringe in the room, but it's part of your handstand journey.
Suffer.
Hashtag handstand journey. But it is a journey. It's interesting. I like handstands. Like, I don't have particularly high technical aspirations on them, but more just as a means of exploring the body and what it's capable of. So it's there's a lot in there what you can get out of the practice. It's also this idea of where do you want to take it? Like, is it just something you want to do in your bedroom? Is it something you want to do for Instagram likes with monkeys crawling on you?
Yeah,
very popular nowadays.
Many ways to use it. But yeah, I think it's essentially what you'd like to use it for, and it's an interesting thing to do ultimately. Like it's fun, and I think that's one thing that attracts a lot of people to it. I love to make kind of a comparison between a handstand and a backflip, where a backflip is, a really good backflip is of course hard to master, but a backflip is very hard to try to do. It's scary, but it's reasonably easy to do once you have a backflip. There isn't that much that is required for you to get around, but it's tough to get around kind of the fear and try it. While a handstand is very much like an easy to try but very, very hard to master thing. So you need, like, almost anyone who have two functioning arms can kind of try to kick up on a piece of grass or whatever.
Yeah.
And it easily becomes this kind of thing where you managed a couple of times. Oh, I actually managed that. I just need to get that feeling again. And then you suddenly found yourself trying like 300 more times in the session. So it's very kind of obsessive in that sense.
Yeah. It's kind of has a good success to failure ratio. It's kind of comes down to, I don't know, in some ways, like, what's the minimum conditioning you need for handstand? It's this idea that, like, we need to do some drills that give us success and give us, sensation in the body, as well as, like, just the ability to maintain and practice. I always have this idea of, like, what is capacity in our balancing? What is how many attempts of what Mikael said? How many attempts can I make in a session that will be worthwhile? And it's like, say, I have a rough formula. I use it. I'll show you a simplified version of it. If I can do 5 by 60 second chest to wall holds, which is one thing in and of itself, that gives me, 300 seconds to fuck around in my handstand, where I can just be like, okay, I'm going to try and kick up, and a kick up will take me 10 seconds to do. So that means I can do 30 kick ups in my training, and that's my capacity maybe. Whereas if I do any more than that, I might just be going beyond what my body has trained in. It's a very rough rule of thumb, but it's this idea of, like, what is the conditioning for? The conditioning is to enable the practice. It's not the end goal of the practice. Unless you do CrossFit, then it is the practice.
Yeah, then it is the practice, and that's fine. But I think if you want to be able to, I think anyone that wants to be able to stand on their hands want to be able to at least stand up there for a while. I would assume that very few that want to practice handstands are to go like, okay, I can stand for 10 seconds now. Okay, I'm done. I think that's a rare occasion.
I think you'd be surprised, actually. I think there's a lot of people out there who are kind of.
I think so.
We met them on a thing where it's just like,
maybe I'm just too jaded.
Yeah, maybe a bit jaded, but I think there's a lot of people who are like, particularly, I've met a few older people over the years who just like,
yeah, you're right.
They're kind of, they want to do it. They want to be able to get the sense of balance, but they literally have no high aspirations. Like, they don't even know a 60-second handstand is a thing.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's just like, yeah, you see, met a few, like, more than a handful of people like this who are just like, I just want to be able to kick up and walk my hands a little and hold it,
You're right, but I think that, like, let's even say that, like, let's say the 10-second handstand, or like being able to stand on your hands for a little while is kind of the goal. Then, like, being able to do a chest to wall handstand where you just don't need to worry about balance, but like you're just able to hold your body for at least twice that time, or like for like twice the time is necessary. But at least, if you want to stand on your hands for 10 seconds and you can't keep yourself up by the wall for 20 seconds, you're probably better off just getting that ability so that you can hold your weight for a while.
I have a question for you then. So when would you say to someone they're allowed to say they can do a handstand?
Yeah, it's interesting.
I have my own answer to this, but I want to hear your one first, and then I'll give my one.
I think it's actually like because I immediately now started thinking about like what I kind of feel qualify for a one arm is. That was the first like just thing that struck my head. But I think for a normal handstand, I would assume like if you're able to kick up into a handstand, again, I'm just going to pull some numbers out of my ass. Let's say 7 out of 10 times you're able to get up and stay for between 5 to 10 seconds. I mean, then you're doing it often enough and for long enough so that like you're being up there and you're correcting yourself, so that like within a try, like, or within a successful try, you're actually doing some balancing.
Yeah. So my working definition on this, it applies for 2 arms and 1 arm. So that people are allowed to say they're allowed to do a handstand or 1 arm when they intentionally enter the handstand, they perform a reactive rebalance, so they lose balance and react to it, and then they restabilize the handstand from that correction, and then choose to exit the handstand. That's my working definition of when you're allowed to say you do a handstand.
That's not bad.
Because, you know, you'll see, just to bump it up to the 1 arm thing, you'll see people who, even myself at the moment, you'll like shift over, you'll find the alignment, you find the stack, you'll get the hand off, and then you're on your hands for even up to 5 seconds, but you're not actually balancing. You've just found that dead center alignment.
Yeah.
You see this.
You're lucky for 3 seconds, and then you fall for 2 of them.
Basically. So it's like, I think that it qualifies the handstand. It's like, okay, I chose to go up, something went wrong, I reacted to it, I fixed the reaction, and then I chose to come down. If you can perform all of them in one set, that's my working definition. You're allowed to say, I can do a handstand.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. So, like, that's not something I love to see when I teach people. It's just like, get up, it looks fine, I see it go south, I see them get back, and then I always just like cheer. Yes, okay. Because that is the thing that I think it's a very underestimated thing too, because being able to do that, like big looking correction that might be defined as bad by the federation, is in reality a very good sign, because it means you caught it. You managed to deal with it, and over time, like 3 years down the line, what would cause you to do that large reaction isn't any longer even visible.
Yeah, exactly.
And like then you would need a much larger wave of destabilization to move into that same kind of larger correction.
Or fatigue. That's kind of one of the points in one of the manuals that you put down, is like your balance breaks down in a certain order as you fatigue. So as you have more conditioning, your corrections are smaller, then they become like, you'll start with like these corrections, it's just the fingertips pulsing or the heel of the hand pulsing. Then as you get tired, then it's like longer squeezes. Then as you get further tired, then your shape starts breaking. Whereas if you're a beginner and you have no conditioning, you have none of the skill, then the shape starts breaking immediately. Yeah. But that's the only way you can go. I think Mikael put in the manual, you have to learn to ride the big waves before you can surf the little ripples. Yeah. Or something like that.
Yeah, or like that both of them are important, but like that it's... I think like the thing with the big wave is just that it's such an underestimated skill set, because it doesn't have that kind of pretty neat quality that we kind of search for aesthetically, and because of that, if you don't allow yourself to try to stay on the fucking hand when you're falling, then you're always going to let that happen. While if you have that kind of constant mindset of, okay, I'm just going to stay on my hands, then like I remember like years back when I was a kid, like, or not a kid, I was 17, I started breakdancing, and somehow I was a fucking kid, and I was trying to, I just figured out that breakdancing, okay, it's probably good to be able to stand on your hands. So I just warmed up with trying to kick the handstand. I would just walk around because I didn't know you could stand still. But I remember that every time I fell down, like stomach side, I would just try to keep my legs in the air. I would just like, I didn't know what I was doing, but essentially what I was doing was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of negatives of presses. So in the end, I learned to press because I just tried to stay on my hands every time I fell down. And I mean, I do have a lucky shoulder structure in terms of pressing, so that like the way I would do it was to stay on top of the shoulders, and I wouldn't planche it much because I was stronger on top than
maybe your planche would be better if you actually learned to planche.
Definitely. So like it just became this thing of I would always just like try to keep myself in the air, and because of that I built up a lot of strength, and that just came from having that like kind of automatic mindset for me. But I think it's important when people are learning that they they kind of learn how to, or that they keep in mind that I'm trying to save it all the time. So like when you like, suppose we should actually mention that with like over and under balance, this kind of terms that we use in term with balancing. So over balance is when you move to the towards the fingertips, and you need to grab the ground with your fingers, or else you fall over. Same as if you stand on your feet and you lean forwards on your foot, you'll have to grab the ground with your toes, or else you'll have to take a step, right? And under balance is basically when your weight moves towards the heel of the palm, and like the thing I talked about now that I would do when I fell from the handstand, I would try to push up in my shoulders for some reason and try to keep my legs in the air, which turn into a negative press. But the under balance is kind of a more complicated thing, because you can do that in several ways. You can do what I did by trying to stay on top of the shoulders, which is kind of what we try to teach in Handstand Factory.
Yeah, there's reasons for it.
Yeah, there's tons of reasons for that. We'll probably talk a lot about that.
Yeah,
in
I
some
think
other
the press episode and
yeah.
the one arm episode will cover why.
Loads of rambles incoming on that.
Yeah.
But you can also planche when you move that direction.
You can also bend the elbows.
And you can bend the elbows, or you can do a combination of the 2 or the 3 as well. So like there are options when you move in that direction. But overbalance is kind of, I think the interesting thing with overbalance, you don't have a choice. Either you grab the ground with your fingers, or you walk, or you fall. There isn't anything else to do. Kind of, there's no kind of sucking in of belly button, or what I call belly button magic that can do any. Yeah, like there's nothing you can do. Like either you grab the ground, or you fall if the weight moves there. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of thing of when you're a beginner at handstands, your battle was with overbalance.
Yeah,
you're just battling to stay on your point. Yeah. And then when you're trying to become someone in handstand, whatever it is, your battle is with underbalance.
Someone.
Because like that's where all the shapes happen. You have to put more mass into the underbalance side.
Yeah.
So we've been rambling for about an hour, I suppose.
Wow.
Bit of an outro, and take it from there. Drink some more coffee, maybe.
Yeah. I definitely need another
first
coffee.
off, I suppose we've got a few more thanks and other stuff to go. So first off, just once again, thanks to everyone on Kickstarter. If you've gotten this far and you've also contributed to our Kickstarter, we really like you and we hope to meet you over the years. It's great. I've been Emmet Lewis. This is Mikael Kristiansen with me. And
this was
we just want to say the Handstandcast, it's brought to you by Handstand Factory. If you're just interested in the practical, like the podcast is going to give you sort of a lot of the theory, the depth in our thinking. But if you're interested in what this practically looks like, we have our online course at Handstand Factory. So, it's a bit of a shameless plug, but, we put a lot of work into it. We definitely on a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff now in text that has never been said in text about handstand ever before. So, really, it was like, I'm still amazed, like, of that course we produced. Like, you have no idea how much coffee we drank and how much we hated each other. And then, some of you probably don't know, or maybe you've noticed in the background, we have Eliza, who is our chief whipcracker, producer, magic lady who does everything.
Probably wouldn't be able to finish this today if she wasn't making us do it.
Yeah, so big shout out to her. Big shout out to the rest of the team behind Handstand Factory. We've got Adam and Ross who do all our photography and videography. Isaac and Sophie who do our graphics, and Isaac is one of our models. We've got Sev. Well, Isaac's more than a model. He's also apprentice, Padawan, general gopher. Generally useful to have around. Have Sev, one of the models as well, and
I guess we're pretty much there.
Oh, yeah, Josh and Morgan as well.
Yeah, Josh and Morgan, totally.
Josh and Morgan, the Wonder Kids.
Yes.
Watch out for Morgan. He's going to be dangerous when he grows up.
Dangerous.
Is he grown up yet?
No, he probably will never grow up. He's like perpetually 18, I think.
Mentally,
but yeah,
right?
thanks a bunch for listening to our things, and there'll be more episodes coming up. So stay tuned for that, I guess.
Stay tuned. And one more thing, if you have any questions for the podcast you'd like to put through, you can put it through with title podcast questions on the contact form on Handstand Factory. Put them through, and we'll see. If your question is good, we will read it out on air. If your question is terrible, we will read it out on air, but with your name attached.
Excellent. So thanks. Now we've been rambling on for long enough.
I've got to turn off the recorder.
Cheers.
Bye.